Okay, dear ladies and gentlemen. Oh yeah, sure. Okay, so now we're going to begin our session about TVET system for 2030. And so it's going to be actually an interactive discussion. So it would be really great if you can, on your seats, you have a page with a QR code. If you can use the menti.com for the voting process. And I will tell you when we will desperately need your opinion on the discussing issues as well. And together, let me introduce our experts first. So today with me, some just incredibly really marvelous expert within the global skills development agenda field. So it's Mr. Baren Chakrun, Director for Policies and Lifelong Learning System in UNESCO. Ms. Manuela Geleng, Director for Skills in the Directorate General for Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion at the European Commission. Mr. Anton Stepanenko, partner from the Boston Consulting Group. Ms. Tatiana Terentьева, Human Resources Director, Rosatom. And Ms. Alexandria Valeriou, Senior Economist from the Educational Field in World Bank. Yeah. So as a short introduction from myself to the session, prior to this World Skills Kazan 2019 45th global competition, we were actually in the process of trying to articulate the most vibrant topics within the skills development agenda, because it was our plan from the beginning that we doesn't want to just host the competition for itself. We always wanted to use this incredible energy and incredible concentration of the world best experts in skills development who always come into the World Skills Global Competitions and Conference, because this is actually the most active change makers in the TVET globally, both from 82 countries of World Skills, from global industrial partners and other companies, from the international organization. So it just would be so waste to do not use this opportunity for this conversation. So we conducted research together with our partner Boston Consulting Group, and with a huge, just really appreciate the support from our national strategic partner Rosatom on this, trying to identify the essence of this skills gap, skills mismatch issue. So we can discuss it here with you as well. So for this very first introduction of actually what is this problem with the skills match, I would ask Anton to give us a brief introduction to the problem.
Hello. Yes. Thank you. Good day, everyone. Katya, thank you very much. Let me indeed start with introducing the topic. So, the research we just conducted together with World Skills and Rosatom studies a very peculiar thing. It's not a secret to everybody in this room that virtually all employers in the world today suffer from what is called a skills gap, which just simply means that they often enough cannot find skilled people to fill in proper vacancies. And it's sometimes not fancy digital whatever vacancies, it's sometimes very basic traditional jobs that you cannot find people for. And we have been studying the reasons of why this happened, and find that one of the key reasons is not that the people you need, they don't exist, because it's not true, they do exist. It is because they are employed somewhere else, in another geography or in another industry, meaning that a lot of people work in the circumstances where they either under or overqualified for the jobs they do, and they have no access, or they are unwilling to pursue opportunities that might be much better for them and then for their potential employer. We call this situation a skills mismatch situation, right? And we find that, and this is based on a huge OECD survey done a couple of years ago, we find that in the world, up to 1.3 billion workers are now working in this skills mismatch situation. So we are talking inefficiency of human capital allocation on a super large scale, because 1.3 is, if you think of it, is double population of all the European countries combined. So here in the slides you can see a little bit from this OECD research of which countries have more or less skills mismatch. And then you see that most of them, for most of them, the skills mismatch would be more than 30%, which means that overall in all OECD countries, 2 out of 5 employees will have this skills mismatch problem, and every second employer would report the same. Now, if you think of it, what this is a hidden productivity tax that all employers, most employers, and virtually all countries in the world pay. Because people are employed, right? There's no unemployment. You cannot see it in the regular kind of statistics, but you just don't get the output you could get otherwise. And how this works? Imagine you are an employer, and I'm sure many of you are, right? If you cannot find a person to match a particular position for very long, then what you do, you take a second best or a third best. What this means is that you will not have the output you wanted, and you will also need to invest in reskilling the person you just took. Or another way around, the person you took can be overqualified for the job you need, right? And it means that someone, a country or an employer before you, overinvested in the education. This means money. So there's no surprise that skills mismatch on the graph here on the left is so unusually well correlated with the labor productivity. All in all, it all comprises to up to $5 trillion US combined in GDP. So this is 6% of our total GDP of this planet today. This is a problem. Let me then take it back to Ekaterina. Thank you.
Thank you, Anton. And basically, in this moment, when we have this introduction, we actually want to ask your opinion. So this is the moment when we are asking you to use your phone. And can you please show the slide? Yes. So using this application, please, you need to enter the code 810819 810819 810819, and please vote, because we want to know your opinion. So based on what Anton just presented, who here think that the most important thing to face the skills mismatch is? So the option A in your application for voting is having all necessary skills and knowledge to be in demand in the labor market. Option B, that learners and employees are motivated to develop and adapt to change. And the option C, that creating labor market opportunities that are available to all potential employees and are consistent with their skills, values, and needs. Okay, so we even have results already. That's interesting. So it looks like the majority of our audience believes so far into the need for lifelong learning, yeah, and the need for adapt and change. Okay, well, yeah, but labor market opportunities is actually growing. Yeah, because yeah, based on obvious reason, we all, from the ones that we all want to have skills which are in demand, relevant skills. We understand that you need to be ready to adapt to actually survive within this changing world and economy. But when you cannot actually find opportunities and you don't know where to look, where to find the proper educational opportunity or where to find the job for your skills, it's also pretty challenging. Okay, so let's stop on this and let's see that in general our audience is really supportive of lifelong learning, although opportunities also need to be known and available. And yes, of course, we need basic skill set as well. And with this, this position of our audience, now I want to ask our distinguished guests. So from your perspective, from perspective of your respective organization, how do you think, who are the main stakeholders to consider when we're developing these skills development strategies? Can you provide examples of what works and what does not work to ensure cooperation? Both between stakeholders and at the global level. Can you identify maybe some main barriers to cooperation and their roots, and maybe even how we can overcome them? I understand that this is like actually 3 really complicated questions, so please feel free to address any of them from your position as you want to comment this challenge. And let's start from Alexandria.
Thank you, Ekaterina, and good morning, everyone. Really, I'm delighted to be here. So let me tackle the first, some ideas on the first couple of questions for discussion. In terms of the stakeholders, I mean, when I think of training and thinking of the differences between training and the general education, I think of going from sort of a school band into a full orchestra, meaning it's really complex. It requires much more so than general education, not to minimize what is required for general education, but there's many more stakeholders are involved in training. So I would say that the coordination needs to happen at 2 levels. At the policy level, you have ministries, you have unions, you have employers, you have organizations, you have R&D institutions, and they require certain rules of the game and organization to be able to have that orchestration to play the beautiful music. Then at the program level, you have training providers who are very heterogeneous. They can be public, they can be private, they can be not-for-profit. You have employers of different types, and then you have employment offices and many more probably in the landscape. So coordination becomes really quite a complex task, but it can be done, and there are examples of programs or governments that are able to achieve such a goal. Now, if I may, I'll just go very quickly on some ideas on what works and what doesn't work. So if I had to summarize based on our research and my own work on what works, I would say there are 3 very important things for systems to work. And the first one is leadership. Without good leadership, it's really hard to get things done. The second thing I would say is trust on an economic and social contract, that improving workforce skills is really going to be a goal for a country moving forward. And then I think the third thing would be having an ecosystem that is credible and that facilitates meaningful partnerships across all of these actors. And I think these 3 things apply at the global, at the national, and at the local level. We all know them, but actually getting them implemented is really hard, but it is possible, and we do have some examples. So just a final, I was thinking about what works and what doesn't work in very concrete terms, as we've been asked. And I came up first with a list of what does not work. So let me share some thoughts, and then my colleagues who have been working in this space can tell us about what works. What does not work? I think having hidden agendas, whether it's government or employers, organizations, does not work. There has to be really meaningful trust for things to play along in a harmonized way. I think the other thing that does not work is treating training as a one-size-fits-all. It's not longer general education. Actually, it's a very heterogeneous landscape, as I've mentioned, and a much more customized solution to different types of needs, ages, is required. Pre-employment is very different from work-based learning, is very different from those who are exiting the system. So I think that we need to be a lot more open about different types of solutions. The other thing that does not work is trying to get a short-term training to solve the problems of accumulated skills deficits that have been there for a very long time. And to think that a 3-month training might actually have the effects of something that is longer term, that's something that we need to work on and work with people to get them up to a skill that is ready to absorb training. The other thing that does not work is financing poor quality training. That we know. Training on the cheap just does not work. Just 2 more things. The other thing that thinking that national qualification frameworks is going to come and solve all our problems, I think that we need to rethink that, and QFs can be very helpful in organizing actors and stakeholders, but they're a lot of work, and it's a big investment, and to make sure that it works, then you have to do it really well. And then finally, I think that the other thing that does not work, and based on our research, is that starting to track students very early on does not work. Students are not ready, they come out and they're not ready to work, they don't really know what they want. So giving them a very strong foundation of skills, transversal skills, is really important for them to be able to choose and then complete training in a much more meaningful way.
Thank you, Alexandria. And just may I comment on something that resonates me a lot, because we will also working with this within Russia, that yes, sometimes you need to accept that actually different set of skills require not only different curriculum but also different timing, and that the core skill, something that actually based on your character, or something that some researchers name growth or fixed mindset, is, or this you also refer to leadership and the proactive position and so on, such things related to deeper characteristic of characters, and not only just some skills that can be easily trained. So to have assumption that this also as well can be trained through the 3-month cheap program, probably it's not a good way to achieve long-term results. Thank you so much. So really resonated. So Manuela, what's your thought on this?
Well, I think, first of all, cooperation is really important, and from a European perspective, of course, it's not just cooperation at national, regional, and local level, but it's also cooperation among the Union's member states. Of course, as the European Commission, we support member states in developing national strategies that are cross-government, whole-of-government strategies where everybody is involved, all the ministries, but also the social partners, NGOs. So we go across the whole board, because we really think that cooperation at all levels is important. Now, if I were to look at where we think are really the bottlenecks, echoing also what Anton was saying, we have surveys that say that 70% of employers in Europe cannot invest, are hampered in their investments because they cannot find the right skills. So I would say that really one area where perhaps we need to focus much more is the link between industry, training institutions, and innovation research. So I think this triangle will need, with the support, of course, with also the involvement of public authorities, I think this is really the triangle we need to develop further. And I think, echoing also what was said on the issue of trust, I think we need a common understanding that there is a shared responsibility. So it's not only businesses, it's not only government, it's not only training institutions, and it's not only individuals. Everybody has to work together to really achieve results. Thank you.
Thank you, Manuela. And I would allow myself a small joke because in Russia sometimes we have difficulty with translating word sharing. Because in a literal translation, it means like, I would say in Russian, разделять, which both can mean I'm sharing, for instance, your values, which means I'm having the same values. But разделять in Russian also means like this is mine and this is yours. So sometimes within the different programs, including educational one, and we will try to encourage cooperation and like shared responsibilities, our participants will say, yeah, no problem. This is your responsibility. This is mine. And let's go, like on our own way. Like, no, this is not the meaning, like true meaning of the word sharing. So yeah, thank you so much. Baren, so in UNESCO, how do you think about the skill development strategies?
Спасибо, Екатерина, и добрый день, и спасибо за приглашение. Поздравляю за доклад.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you for invitation. Thank you for your reports. And I think these are really good receipts. And I'd like to speak English, please.
First of all, I'm very happy with the results of the survey.
Yes.
And the emphasis on lifelong learning. But we have an international audience, and I think it's important to set some elements that correspond to the international perspective. The first one is that the private sector is not homogeneous. You have multinational, formal private sector, you have informal private sector, you have rural livelihoods. And the question, when you set it regarding the skills mismatch, the overqualification or the underqualification has to be framed in this broader understanding of what is the private sector and how it is organized across different contexts. So it's important that your analysis goes further in that direction. That's one aspect, and I'm trying to be provocative vis-à-vis the analysis, which I obviously highly appreciate, but we need to take the discussion a bit further. The second aspect on the analysis of the skills mismatch and overqualification, underqualification, is that it doesn't take fully in consideration a lifelong learning perspective. Because we are basically separating between initial TVET and continuing training, which is happening formal and again non-formal and informal. So take into consideration what people have learned and what skills they have developed. And we know all that we do develop skills in the workplace, but we do also lose skills in the workplace. And the result of PIAC and STEP that Alexander is reading shows that people lose their skills as well because the workplace is not supportive for further development. So the analysis has to take this lifelong learning perspective. And the policies cannot only focus on initial training. It has to focus also on this lifelong learning perspective. And we have policy tools for that. We have tools for recognition of prior learning, tools for valorizing the skills that people acquired. We have heard yesterday that in Russia you have now skills passport. We have different tools that exist across the countries. I think it's important that there are more and more resources and tools that can support recognizing and valuing the learning that is happening not only in formal schooling or formal setting, but also in non-formal and informal. The other aspect that I think is a bit problematic in the analysis that we are missing a part on analysis of the entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial learning. People do not only get wage job, where you will compare the qualification that is offered and the job that is offered and requirement in terms of qualification, what person is doing. We have in many countries, and we have a lot of economies where the growth is not creating enough jobs for absorbing the newcomers to the labor market, or for absorbing people who are being fired from the labor market, because that's also the situation in countries, including in European countries. So there is this aspect of entrepreneurship and how this can drive further employment opportunities, business, etc. So this is something that seems to me important to take into consideration. Last 2 points that are important, I believe, and because you are asking about what are the stakeholders and how to support. We, and the analysis focus, and we have a lot of important examples of public-private partnership, and how employment and entrepreneurs will meet with training providers, work-based learning, and other systems that I will not enter into details here. But I would like to mention another way of skills development, understanding the skills development, is business-to-business cooperation. That means how, for example, large companies can work with SMEs. In most of the economies, the large part of the economy is SMEs. And the problem is that small and medium enterprises have difficulties in articulating their training needs, have difficulties in expressing their skills need. So there is a need for this business to business, and we have some good example. Let me mention an example, for example, from the Republic of Korea, where there is a program called CHAMP, and this program is connecting large companies with the small and medium companies in the supply chain and helping developing the skills in the small and medium enterprises through the support of large companies. So this is something that is important to consider. Last and not least, and because you will give the floor to maybe Tatiana after me, and I would like to provoke Tatiana. And I would like to refer to the Continuing Vocational Training Survey, the European one in 2015. That survey shows that for the companies surveyed, the 3 top skills that are considered needed for their development, only 13%, I repeat, only 13% are fully investing in those skills in the training that they are doing. So making the assumption that companies know what they need, are investing in what they need, probably is misleading assumption. And that rather than just focusing on developing, and I'm not against the company, I'm saying there is a need, rather than focusing on developing the capacities only of part of the system, public services, employment services, training providers, we need to invest in capacities of enterprises and their capacity to articulate their needs, and the capacity to express their needs, and the capacity to invest in quality training, as Alexandra was saying. I stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Baran. And before we move on to our business voice, actually, I want to also comment that from our one of your comments, like how we can actually sometimes lose the skills. Then when we just started in 2014, our experiment back then, now it's already a successful competition for the WorldSkills Juniors and WorldSkills High Tech, we suddenly achieve really interesting data showing the results of the same task for the juniors 14-16, for the classical TVET age students like 18-22, and for WorldSkills High Tech participants, usually 22-27. And sometimes we receive the data, it was not like massively, but there was definitely cases, and it was actually a significant amount of percentage when the results of what they were showing with the same standard actually was decreasing. So our question was like what's we doing with them, with our system, that in 14 they're like better prepared to do this electrician task than in 24. That's like something wrong, probably. Within the system. Yeah, but then of course we start to develop it, and now situation is better. But yeah, moving to the business perspective, as you already said, the business of course is not homogeneous. Yeah, it's hard to say usually like what's company with. Companies are so different, and definitely it's going to be like too I don't know, brave assumption to say that the small bakery in I don't know, in Sызrань have the same skill demand as a Rosatom, as a big company. But also, like what you mentioned, like I'm, from my perspective, from our experience to work with Rosatom, I would definitely say that Rosatom is within this 13%, like really invest a lot and really articulate their demand for skills. But Tatiana, about the questions was asked, like what's your position from the company's perspective?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm absolutely agree with my colleagues that skills development strategies should be developed in close cooperation between all stakeholders: government, educational institutions, business, and each individual in person. And without this cooperation, we might see global skills mismatch and economic losses, as my partner said. And a little bit about our company, because I'm sure it's important to understand what we are doing in our skills strategies. We are the big technological corporation operating in a global scale. We have 250,000 employees in 300 organizations, which provide complex nuclear services from uranium enrichment, fuel fabrication, engineering, electricity generation, to decommissioning and nuclear waste treatment. I'd say all sphere of a lot of sphere of business. And in our business, a human is the main asset, and that is why we pay a lot of attention to the development of our employees. A new technological revolution influence all business sphere and requirements much re- and upskilling of the existing workforce and the need for new skills acquisition. With the high speed of change, businesses should play a benchmarking role in the process of developing skill strategy as they generate labor demand. So as an employer, we create cooperation with all stakeholders, starting from schools and universities to building internal infrastructure for lifelong learning for our employees. Today we have 240 Rosatom schools, a consortium of Rosatom universities headed by MIFI, as well as in-house academies for training technical, hard and soft skills. And this way, as an employer, we focus on building a corporate culture of everyday learning. And I believe our main task is to bring up the habit of lifelong learning in our employees. At the same time, they need to create an environment for employees to learn whatever they are, selecting the skills they need and for their job and unlocking their potential. And concerning the examples, I could say that it's not just good words that I said before. Today, we share knowledge with Rosatom schools to raise the standards among teaching staff. We pay a lot attention to teaching our teaching staff and help them learn to unlock children's potential. Later, we have increased competition for entry to universities, as we have the high entry requirements. We organize internships and apprenticeships for students to bring them closer to real business during studies. And we also hold the careers days to early familiarize students their job opportunities at Rosatoms. And to my mind, the main challenge here is the speed of implementation changes in the program of educational institutions. So we take efforts to meet these talents. And an example, we run a pilot project for practical assessment of knowledge of college and university. And I appreciate WorldSkills Russia because we launched this project with the support of WorldSkills Russia. And we also provide students with the opportunity to compete in equal terms with our employees in our corporate championship Atom Skills. Today, Atom Skills is the biggest corporate championship in the world. We have 31 competencies and 1,200 participants. And also we have more than 3,000 scholars who are visiting our championship and helping them in their future choosing their jobs. And I believe this experience gives a good feedback to the educational institution too about the necessary changing in the educational curriculum. At the same time, we hold a conference on the sidelines of atom skills, together with a representative of Minister of Education, WorldSkills, our experts, our participants, and plant directors and directors of college. It's a good platform of discussing how to make our preparing for nuclear jobs in the nearest time, and how and the results of this year, we built a roadmap defining how we are going to increase the efficiency of preparing students for the nuclear jobs, how to change the curriculum and make our cooperation better, and how to implement this changing faster. I could say that this network is a good example of cooperation in one side. And another challenge here is for our corporation too is the cross-cultural communication, which involves language proficiency and cultural sensitivity. Rosatom pays much attention to it because we have a large share of international projects in our portfolio. Now we have an special international program to create a good environment for students from partner countries and to make the experience of living and studying in Russia better. And now we have 1,700 students from 50 countries at our partner universities graduating from nuclear engineering programs. And another side, we introduce and we create training programs for our employees to make them ready for efficient cross-cultural collaboration in their job. Yeah.
Thank you, Tatiana. It's actually, I think today in the morning, everybody who saw the opening plenary with Scott Kelly and Sergei Krikolov, it was an amazing example of cross-cultural, cross-national, international, amazing cooperation. And also, another important question that you raised about the speed of change. Because from the one side, we're all feeling this pressure. That's obvious. The speed of change is growing. Complexity is growing as well. So each and every who is trying to find simpler solution for more complicated tasks, I think the failure is just the only option, unfortunately. So we need to work with the speed of change to still be realistic, about the opportunity to adapt and adjust. But at the same time, I agree with you, we cannot ignore it because we're just going to be blind. But actually, I want to ask our audience one more time. Can we show the question for the second round, please? So we're still in the menti.com, but now we need to enter the code 583881, 583881, 583881, and we are asking you to answer to the question, which actually type of solution should be prioritized, human-oriented versus economy-oriented? And you're answering really, really fast and furious, but when I was listening to Tatiana's speech, I actually was thinking about the complexity of the engineering system that they are working on, and how much their work is actually the whole city, sometimes depending on the effectiveness of their energy system, of their nuclear stations. So, and in this moment, to say that their life learning, self-realization of each and every young specialist on this company is bigger priority that actually succeed of this incredibly complicated engineering system. Sometimes it's nice to say, but much harder to actually implement. So let's give a few more seconds to see what's Okay, we have really human-oriented audience here, which is super nice, yeah, and encouraging. And with this, of course, we were provocative. Of course, we understand that we need to supply the industry and economy demands, and at the same time provide more human-oriented opportunities and more customized decision, as Baren mentioned, because this mass standardization doesn't work in the 21st century anymore. But is there something about, Anton, maybe you will share with us, is there something that is not mass standardization and not uniqueness?
Thank you. I will share indeed. So taking off where we ended with the 1.3 billion workers as an efficient human capital allocation, that's a huge number, isn't it? And there must be a reason why this happens. And that indeed the question was provocative. We do feel that the problem lies in how we approach labor and how we approach education and HR as it will today. And we love to standardize them, right? It's a post-industrial thing that we do. We standardize professions, we standardize requirements to how you educate to these professions, we standardize how you approach HR on the country scale or on the company scale. That's what we do, and that indeed starts to fail in the world where a third of the jobs and occupations en masse, expected to be en masse in 10 years from now, don't exist yet, right? And indeed, standardization just cannot be an answer as a tool that will help everybody get and reach his or her unique potential, right? We call this a mass uniqueness challenge, and an answer to this mass uniqueness challenge, which is a set of thinking on what you actually do with it, we have called human-centric in our research, or human-oriented, as you just have been voting. And the problem is, well, there's got to be something that we can do about the problem. And we felt that mass uniqueness as a notion is just so much more complicated than lifetime learning concept as such, as Baran noted, is incredibly important, but it just cannot be sufficient. There's got to be something else. And the structure we arrived to is very intuitive. It basically suggests that to decrease the skills gap, right, you need to make sure that you care about three things. Number one is capabilities. It means that you prepare your labor force not for the jobs existing today, but also for the jobs that you expect will be existing in the future by providing the foundation that I think Alessandria just also raised to make sure they can be prepared for them. And second, they have access to, and they are engaged in continuous retraining throughout their life. So this is capability. Motivation. Apparently a huge problem around the world, as our survey in World Skills countries shows. You gotta have workers that are responsible and take accountability for their personal and professional development, and that strive to find opportunities that would be a better match for them. And what you will find that in most places on the world, workers en masse, they just cannot be bothered and they go with the flow, and that's one of the biggest challenges we see. And number three, finally, if you have a worker who is capable enough, who is super motivated, then it must be that you provide an opportunity for this worker, right? So we call it access to opportunities. And this starts with just simply having information about what opportunities exist around the world, around you, right? And not just the most obvious and like within 10 kilometers from where you are now, but all the opportunities that can exist for you. And then you are judged not by the strength of your diploma, but you are judged by the actual skills that you have. If you are in a disadvantaged situation, or you are disabled, or any other sort of the situations, you still have the opportunities to be successful and to pursue an opportunity for yourself. And one of the most important challenges there, of course, is values, is making sure that enterprises puts values of people, this human centric thing that you just voted for in the center of what they do. This is the hardest thing, I think, for everyone. So these 7 things provide a structure where you can think about it, you can compare yourself to it, and then it's suddenly, from a humanitarian thought of let's be all human-centric, it becomes an instrument, and it becomes a way of working, and becomes a way of implementing new approaches and solutions. Thank you, Katya.
Thank you, Anton. So with this understanding, with this idea of the mass uniqueness and the capability, access, and motivation approach, let's hear our experts again. And in this case, let's start from the company's perspective and then move to the international organization. So my question to you, dear experts, is going to be, what are the most pressing reforms to implement to ensure that learners and workers are future ready? Can you identify specific aspects that should be prioritized to ensure that TVET systems are relevant to their specific context? And could you provide concrete examples or solutions or practices from your region, country, or company based on your organization's experience? So Tatiana, the first comment I would ask from you.
In Russia, employees traditionally have a very strong background in hard skills. First of all, it's our, I'd say, Russian unique. And but for the new generation of workforce, it is not enough to concentrate on hard skills only. And maybe it might sound surprising from a person working for a high-end corporation, but future-ready means for me that people are multi-skilled and function agnostic. Most important of all will be the ability to deal with the change, to learn new things, and to preserve your mental balance in unfamiliar situation. Again, learning to learn, resilience and adaptability. To my mind, it's our main task, and we at Rosatom actively implement a model of competencies based on 21st 4Cs competencies: critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, and communication. And what concern at TVET system, TVET system should always be demand-driven, and programs which are less relevant and with lower employment rates should be either be closed or modified. And new programs which are highly relevant to local industries and have high employment rates should be developed in tight conjunction with the industry. And the main challenge for all stakeholders, to my mind, first of all, it's able to modify their programs and curriculum quickly, following demands of the business. They need to work in conjunction with the business, and what our experience shows that when we are talking together on the one side lines, and first of all, and item skills, I could say it's very good examples, we could see how our TVET system and the universities involves into the changing their programs and curriculum, and they start to think more our business needs, because they do it together with our plans directors and line managers. And our new idea and what we start to do a lot at involving our line managers and our experts. And here I know there are a lot of our experts and who are our main stakeholders too, because they start our pilot and center of competencies, and they shows and help our business to implement the skills what they need. And the productivity after training, after finishing training in this center of competencies shows sometimes in twice and cross. Yes. And to add to this, our directors of centers of competencies help our TVET teachers to change their curriculum. And they go to the TVET system to train the students. And today, you know, we have approximately 30 participants in the future skills in this World Skills Championship. It's a real result of good job of our experts and our directors of center competencies. Thank you.
Thank you, Tatiana. It's actually, I know that, I definitely know that the brand has a comment on this. When usually, you know, when the company is saying that they are more value, you know, the soft skills and critical thinking and the collaboration and communication, usually brand in this moment asking like, do you ready to invest into developing these skills and not the hard skills? And you know, and I know, yeah, that in your case, it's definitely yes. And that's actually a lot of companies more and more start saying first, then actually implementing practices when they're saying, okay, it's much easier and cheaper to train them some fast hard skill if the technology changing, than to, for instance, I don't know, change their type of thinking and, for instance, develop more critical thinking or more collaborative approach, which is much, much harder. Going back to this, like how to change this core skills. Skill set. Okay, Baran, if I already started to answer for you, let's switch to actually your position on this.
No, thank you. We do believe, Tatiana, of course, I mean, that the companies are investing. But again, we need to look at data. And again, I would like to refer to the continuing training, although the data are from 2015 and we still don't have the new data. But when you look at the investment, companies are investing in terms of training, are investing more on hard skills rather than on soft skills. So, and obviously, when you send a survey to a company and you ask, do you want a person who is communicative, a person who problem solving, etc. Obviously, you have yes to everything. The question is then, what is the trade-off? And how much you invest in terms of initial training and how much you invest in continuing training. And I think, again, that lifelong learning perspective is important. What's the broad set of skills that are required to enter the labor market and then to continue learning? I think this is the question that we have. But from a reform perspective, and now I would like to move to the policy response, because we have also in the room policymakers. I think that what your report shows is that it's the importance of the learning pathways that should accompany the career pathways. I think that we all agree that today a lifelong job and a lifelong company is no longer the case, and that people will have to change jobs and probably change the companies. And that puts for us the question regarding how to support the learning pathways of individuals. From a policy perspective, we see reforms that are coming in many countries, and I would like to refer to some of them. The first one is that we see some countries adopting qualifications that are broad. that are giving individuals, I would say, the right skills to not only enter the labor market, but also to continue learning and the 21st century skills. So a kind of a broad set of skills. And that's countries like France, like now UK, New Zealand. So we see this shift toward a broad set of qualification. The second is that countries are adopting flexible learning modalities. And we have in the room our colleagues from Finland. The new reform in Finland emphasis is about flexibility, is about multi-entry into colleges, is about recognizing the skills and qualifications that are required in the workplace and offering this flexible learning modalities. So this is another reform that is important. Finland is an example, but other countries are also important. The other is accompanying the learning pathways by recognizing the skills that are required in different settings. And again, we have many countries that are introducing recognition of prior learning. The country that reached scale is, for example, Portugal. And Portugal reached more than 250,000 persons who get their skills recognized through recognition of prior learning. What worked well in Portugal? First, the funding. There are resources that are put for the system. Second, the political will. And third, which is I think important, is the institutional setting that can offer people opportunities to know what is in demand in the labor market, get career guidance and counseling, and get supporting system that can help them go through a recognition of prior learning modality. So that, I would say, ecosystem that can support learning pathways and career pathway is important. Last and not least from my side, because your audience is a UNESCO fan audience, so for me, this human-centric is very important. I think that we shouldn't I would say, put in confrontation the economic and the human-centric perspective, and I think that's the point that we all share. And in a way, if I put this in a sustainable development agenda, the sustainable development agenda has the three pillars. The economic pillar, the social equity pillar, and the sustainability pillar. So we need to think about these three dimensions. And at UNESCO, we use a metaphor of lenses. So the lens helps you sometimes maybe concentrate or prioritize an economic dimension versus a social equity, or prioritize environmental dimension. So that lens is important. Now, what we can do to make this happen, because I like your metaphor of massive or
mass uniqueness.
Yeah, mass uniqueness, because it's a very important metaphor. But then the question is how to offer lifelong learning opportunities to all, because we need to move from the ideal to realities. What do we have today? We have companies like Tatiana's companies who are investing in skills development, who have the capacity to invest. And the governments have to create incentives for these companies to invest further in skills development for their own staff, but also for the supply chain staff, or at least companies. The second is that we have mapped the international landscape, and around the world we have around 70 countries who have training funds. And the training funds are usually funded through a levy on the payroll. That supports the company's investment in skills development, that supports apprenticeship and other forms of learning, sometimes supports training providers. I think that in those training funds, there is a possibility to create what we call a window for individuals' needs and not only companies' needs. And we have a good example there. For example, let me take the example of France, where there is a new scheme that is called Learning Account, Compte Formation. And the idea is that while companies can continue investing in training, there is a part of the fund that is earmarked for individuals to invest in their own learning and invest in learning that they think is important for them. But this has to be accompanied by quality information regarding the labor market and career guidance and counseling. And I would like to stop there. Thank you.
thank you, Beren. I think it's really adds some interesting additional value to the success motivation capabilities approach, because you basically also saying that even having all of this, we still need to be sure to have ecosystem, basically, which support you on each steps of the process. And then we're actually going to see it a little further in our discussion that, yes, some countries are already on the stage, like, for instance, Germany, where it's more question of, like, we having all of this online platform, and the question how to not even synchronize, because it's impossible, but how to navigate, individual through all of these different types of opportunities. And of course, we have countries and regions who do not have such luxury of the multiple choice of educational and training opportunities. So, Manuela, from your perspective, is it, just your comment on this.
Thank you. Well, actually, I could be extremely brief because I could subscribe totally what Borin just said. In fact, what we see that technical skills with the rapid change that we have will expire between 2 and 5 years. So that clearly means first message is initially education is important, but it's not the end of the story, it's rather the beginning. So from there, I see two challenges. We see two challenges. One is the motivation of the individual, because clearly we can offer everything in the world, but if the individual is not motivated to engage, we are doomed to fail. The second element is know what to learn in a world that is changing fast. So let me give a few examples of what we are doing at European level. So on knowing what to learn, first of all, of course, technical skills are important, but transversal skills, the so-called soft skills, become more and more important, especially with the onset of artificial intelligence. Skills like critical thinking, disruptive thinking are becoming more and more important. We have currently two programs through which we try to support excellence in vocational education and training, which is by fostering centers of excellence and putting them in a network across Europe, so that we have vocational education grow across European countries. And to know what to learn, we are also working very closely through sectors, industrial sectors, to try to anticipate skills, at the same time help training follow the pace of change and be available with the right training. Now, whereas this part might be, let's say, simpler, I think the real difficult nut to crack is really the issue of motivation. And I think this is really where we need to put the emphasis. As you know, in Europe, we have proclaimed a set of rights, social rights, and one of these, under the European Pillar of Social Rights, is about the right to training, lifelong learning, and education for all. So, well, we have this as an aspiration, as a principle to look for, but of course, we need to see how we can make it concrete. And if I look at experiences across the world, I do think that what some member states and what some other countries in the world are developing, this idea of having an individual entitlement, is something that would be very helpful. On one side, because it creates a shared responsibility that it's also for you as an individual to undertake training, but also because training has a cost, and this may be a barrier, because we see precisely that those that should be doing more training are not doing training. And in a new world of work, where more and more workers are not in standard contract, but have part-time work for platforms, how can they be trained because necessarily their employer is not interested in training someone that works only a few hours a week for them. So if in conclusion, I think the two issues that are really challenges and on which we need to work on is, well, skills anticipation on one side, and then the human dimension, how to motivate people to feel responsible for their own future.
Thank you, Manila. I think it's incredibly important point because, again, it's about the balance. From the one side, we know that, and I think Tatiana and Baren mentioned it as well, like when everything is taken to the person, sometimes just this is how human nature works. We start to take things for granted. And our motivation is actually decreasing instead of increasing. And but the other kind of side of this line, I would say that's when, of course, when the person do not receive any support and totally lost in the system without funding, without mentor support, of course, it's also like negative story. So there's like balance to have the person totally self-conscious and motivated and feeling total responsibility for their own life, for their own career, for their own education, and then nobody else is actually more interested in their own development than they are. But at the same time, providing enough, like really important, enough support and guidance to actually encourage this development. Really important point. Valeria, from the World Bank perspective, what are the strategies?
So first of all, I echo what has been mentioned by my colleagues. We work together on a number of programs at various levels in country. So at the World Bank, we work at three levels to tackle this issue. And the first one is improving general and basic education. Foundational skills will never be out of style. You really need them to develop higher order cognitive skills. And cognitive skills and social and emotional skills are intertwined and they're learned early on. The notion that you can begin to tackle them, until later it just doesn't work. You really need to work with students from early on to make sure that those are embedded within the curricula, and so that when they arrive to a training program, they're ready for more of those skills. So we work very actively on that, and we have programs in many countries. In the training space, we also have a very active portfolio. There's a lot of demand. We work with many partners. We're looking at training as a continuum that includes short-term training or longer-term training, depending on the needs of the young people or sometimes working-age adults. And we're moving much more into what we call precision training, meaning we'd like to be able to support systems that are able to provide training that the person can access training when he or she needs that training, in the way in which that person needs the training, where that person needs the training, and in just the right amount for that training. So it's a term borrowed from the health sciences, but we're moving towards how can we deliver precision training or help governments and employers be able to do that? So with employers, we're looking into the frontier employers. What are they doing for different types of workers? What is Google doing? What is Amazon doing? And some of the other large-scale employers in various countries who are at the frontier. What are they doing? How do they train for where and with whom and how much does it cost and what are their barriers? And we're learning from that so that we can bring that to our third set of actors, which is sort of the employers and workplace, where we also have a very active portfolio. And package these kinds of approaches so that medium-sized and small-sized enterprises can learn from what the resettlements are doing, and they might not be able to implement it at that scale, but at least, they'll be closer to the frontier, and they can see that other employers are really investing in their people, and they're learning what that investment is having in terms of a return, whether it is by having fewer accidents or greater sales and a number of other indicators. And let me just mention a couple of things in terms of the most pressing reforms. one of the things that is very important in all of the programs that we finance, whether it's general education training or working with employers, is to establish a system that is able to monitor, measure, innovate, and learn about results. Those results that accrue to the individual, which would be very human-centric, those results that accrue to the employer, sales, or other types of indicators, and to the nation. Do we have increased productivity? And it sounds very simplistic, but we actually see many systems that do not measure what it is that they're doing, and it's more of either bad quality training, or sometimes just by inertia things are moving along, and sometimes governments are investing a lot of money in training. And I was just in India 2 weeks ago, and I see my colleague from India. You guys are investing quite a bit of resources in IT platforms to do just this, to be able to track where your investment is going, to whom is it going, and is it actually accruing the benefits, so that that social contract that needs to be established between the government and employers and everybody else is visible. You see, here is what we're getting out of our investment. So those are two things that, I mean, the measurement and the monitoring is really, really important. And the other thing is that, really going back to something you've mentioned, Borhin, give really employers play a fundamental role. Many do not yet, sometimes because they're unwilling, sometimes just because they don't know how, right? But we need to work with them to make sure that those that do not know how or are on the fence are able to join the effort and see what it is that they can get. That they really get young people into their premises. Sometimes they're very unwilling to get the young people because they don't have experience, and there are all sorts of barriers. Really, to get them in, it's really important for that person who's just joining the labor market to get their first job, because that's going to set his or her trajectory for life. If you get a good job to begin with, you go this way. If you don't, our results show that you go in a different path. So working with employers to make sure that they're really, truly a partner in a human-centric, even though they're going to get something out of it, there's an economic incentive for them as well, is really really important. And so in all of our investments, that's what we're striving towards.
Thank you, Alexandria. And I would ask Anton for his final intervention, because as we already heard from basically all of the speakers, in Russia we would say that у нас говорят, что не все йогурты одинаково полезны.
Not all yogurts are equally healthy.
Looks like the situation are not the same in the different types of countries. And when we are talking about the next steps, and this is what actually we would like our audience to think about and to maybe join the workshop that's going to be after the session on the second side of the day about who's driving. When you're going to think about the different types of the customized solution, Anton, can you brief us on this cluster system?
Thank you very much. I think we're out of time, so I will be lightning speed with this. And also allow me another anecdote of the sort. It will be Anna Karenina, though, by Tolstoy. Right? You know that all the happy families are alike, but all the unhappy families are unhappy in their own way. And we, of course, recognize that all countries will have their own challenges, first and foremost, economic environment, but also how they deal with their labor market and their education. That is, of course, true. But we also think that the structure of capabilities, motivation, and access to opportunities provides a way to think in patterns of different solutions that can fit this or that problem around the world. And so you can have segments of countries with potentially similar problems where potentially similar solutions could be fitting. And you see them on the slides. Let me just do a couple of comments. For example, if all the capability and motivation and access are on a pretty high level, and that would be a country like, if you allow me, Germany, right? Then the set of challenges for you in that particular respect would be a very peculiar, right? So if a developing world country will lack labor market-related online platforms, Germany will have 200 of them. Okay, and then the challenge is not to have the platform. The challenge is how you align so many different platforms into some sort of a making sense on the policy level. And then another example let me take from here is talent exporters, right? If the capability is high, motivation is, well, all right, but the access is not so much, right? You will have people leaving your country, talented people leaving your country, and that would be, I'm sorry to say, Russia would be among those countries, right? Or giving you another example of a segment, if you have plenty of opportunities and you can have mobility and you can, I don't know, have values and everything, but the local population motivation is not at the best level and capability is only kind of emerging, right? You will have countries importing talent into them. Saudi Arabia and this part of the world would be a good example. So that's, again, not to say that the countries are alike, because they're not, but some similar challenges might have similar solutions. And now, what is a practical way to move forward with all this that we wanted to leave you with this idea when you leave the session is, well, and I think all of the speakers, without any exception, mentioned that cooperation is a way forward, right? Now, for this cooperation, you need a structure and you need an instrument. Otherwise, a cooperation is just a word. And we believe that it is not impossible to provide, first of all, the information for everybody, like a measurement tool that a country could use to compare itself to its peers and understand where on the capability, motivation, and access, on the lifetime learning, on skills, mobility, on everything, you are worse or better or much more advanced than what you need to be. Then you can set up ambition. And this way, you can put together an informed skills strategy and know how to move forward with this. And then, if you think of it, what is a informed skills strategy, right? It is actually not something new. It is actually something that companies use a lot. Like for companies, there's a coined term for this, it's called talent management. So ideally what we're saying is that if companies can be successful in their talent management, and I think Tatiana came up with numerous examples of how this can be achieved, then the countries can also learn from companies to do talent management as well. And the instrument that we can use is the library of practices, is the global expert network of people around the world sharing and advancing these practices. And I think the good idea for us is that doing this research together, we identified more than 50 super good programs around the world tackling one or another challenge out of what we're discussing today. So we are very hopeful that both the index, the measurement system, and the global expert network can be built based on this going forward, ensuring that everybody will have a chance to live a life where his or her potential will be realized to its fullest. Thank you.
Thank you, Anton. And I think this is actually going to be perfect ending for our session, because in the beginning I wanted to ask our experts for one more last comment, what our audience need to think about, on which focus. But I think that actually it was said enough. We really our respective experts give you a lot of food for thought and a lot of ways actually how move forward to this positive changes toward the TVET system 2030. But actually, because we're going to have next workshops connected to the session regarding who's driving, I just want to highly emphasize that, from my perspective, the only question on who's driving is you if you are taking, as Baran mentioned, I think everybody mentioned, if you have leadership, if you have proactive approach, and if you within your own position, whenever it's a teacher in the college, whenever it's a headmaster, whenever it's a policymaker in the region, whenever it's a specialist on the human resources in the company, whenever is your position, but if you are taking the proactive approach and actually trying to move forward to the direction, trying to implement best practices, so the only question on the only answer to the question who's driving is you. So please join this workshop, implement practices which are working for you, and I wish us all to actually see the better TVET system in 2030. Thank you. Thank you to our experts. Thank you.